Okay, I'll start now. Thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Lochlan Dulson from Cumbria Woodlands. This webinar is on woodland grants, Demystifying Woodland Grants it's called. It's going to have a particular focus on new woodland management grants. The webinar is funded by a project called Woodland Futures, which is a Trees Call to Action Fund project, which is Defra funding, Forestry Commission funding administered by the Heritage Lottery Fund. And it's done in partnership with Grown in Britain, and we have Dougal here from Grown in Britain today. You can see on the screen right now, there's a couple of links to some key Cumbria Woodlands resources. One is Canopy Learning, which is an online learning platform, and the other is the Canopy Directory, which is a place to find professional forestry services or list your own professional. Very quiet, I see. What's everyone else saying? Dougal, am I quiet?
I can hear you, but if you speak up a little bit, it might be easier for those with some devices that aren't quite so loud.
I think everyone turns their volume up, but is ready to turn it down when someone else speaks. And I'll move my microphone slightly closer to me. I think that'll be fine. So yeah, have a look at those two links. We'll put them in the chat later as well. This is a QR code, very fancy way of accessing it. But there's also links in the chat too. So the point of this webinar, so this is the second in a 2-webinar series. The first webinar was 2 weeks ago, which was fantastic and covered a whole range of, it basically was woodland management in its totality, as much as we could fit into an hour and a half. And it covered all of the silvicultural possibilities around adding value to your woodlands, making them more resilient, maximizing the value, and also helped highlight some of the key threats as well, climate change and pests and diseases. Hopefully that webinar got everybody excited about what they can do in their woodlands, with the obvious question, well, how am I supposed to pay for the extra resources and time required to do really good silviculture? And the answer to that will partially come in this webinar, which is about the new higher tier woodland management grants, which aren't technically out, but will be soon. Peter's going to present on that. So the format of the webinar is Peter Fox from the Forestry Commission has kindly agreed to present on new grants and also has some information on existing grants. Following that presentation, there'll be a panel chaired by myself with Peter from the Forestry Commission, Dougal Driver from Grown in Britain, and Charles Robinson from Robinson Forestry. And we can answer any of your questions on specifically on woodland management grants and how they might be applied, but also on any woodland grants. If I can ask you to keep your cameras and your microphones off while we're presenting, that just means that the recording doesn't just has us on it. But if you want to ask a question, put it in the chat, put your hand up, and if you want to say it out loud, feel free to turn your camera on at the time. So I'm going to start with a link to something called Mentimeter, which just gives us an idea, and you all an idea of who's on the webinar. So I'm going to put a link in the chat now, which if you click will open up a new web page, and I'm also going to present the answers here. So you should be seeing a thing that says where are you from, and there we go, brilliant, people have figured it out. So if you go to the link, or you can use a QR code there, put in where you're from, and the answers are appearing on the screen now. We can all get an idea. If somebody puts the same thing in twice, that gets bigger. So if somebody else is here from Staffordshire, you'll make the Staffordshire bigger. Good range of people there, that's great.
I like that those of us from Gloucestershire are lazy and we just put gloss. It's like, you know, that'll do.
It's slightly bigger, so at least two of you
exactly
the same way. No capital letter gloss.
Yeah.
It's good. Everybody from England so far, which is helpful because the focus of this is on the English grant scheme. We'll also say, before I forget, is that Peter's kindly here. He's a really experienced woodland officer from Cumbria, but he might not have all of the answers because some of these grants are quite new. So where he doesn't have an answer, Pete will take that away and find an answer for us, and we should be able to share that with you. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is what's your job? Good range of occupations there, with obviously a focus on forestry. We move on to the next slide. And then, how did you hear about this webinar? I think this is the penultimate question. Well, we can see who has the stronger marketing team, Grown in Britain or Cumbria Woodlands, based on answers to this. Okay, thanks for that. And the last slide is a personal curiosity of mine, which is just, as individuals, we all have, I guess, biases or things that we put above other things. So what I've got here is a version of the pillars of sustainability, and I'd like you to just rank them in the importance that you feel. Be honest. You can put 100% for all of them if you want, but I won't believe you if you do, and nobody can see your answers. So. So first place, currently nature, second place climate, third place timber, fourth place people. Have I stopped sharing? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for indulging that, everybody. And I'm going to pass over to Peter now. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Lochlan. I'll just share and start presenting. There we are. Great, thanks. So I can't see anyone now, I can just see my screen, so I can't see any chat. So I'm just going to rely on Lochlan to interrupt me if need be. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending. I'm Peter Fox. I'm a woodland officer for West Cumbria, coming up to 20 years this year. And I kind of got to that stage in life where I'm starting to think I've forgotten more than I know or have learned, but I'm confident enough I can do a pretty good job this evening. So the grand title, Demystifying Woodland Grants and Regulations, that's a big subject. And if I talk for an hour, we'll only skim the very outer edges of that subject. And there's a good chance that people who've come on with specific questions might not get what they want addressed. So the plan is, I've just been asked to do a very brief update on felling licenses, and then I'm going to focus on CS higher tier, tell you what we know so far, see if we can whet your appetites. And I think that will take about half an hour, and then that should hopefully leave a good bit of time for people to ask questions and get what they want out of this, rather than me trying to cover everything, grants and regulations, and maybe skimming over some things. So, yes, Forestry Act requires a felling license in place to fell growing trees. There are a number of exemptions. I haven't listed them all here. But yeah, if you're felling less than 5 cubic meters in a calendar quarter, or 2 if you're selling the timber, you're fine. Dangerous and nuisance trees is something we hear often. Oh, we felled a tree, it was dangerous. There has to be an imminent risk presented by that tree to a third party, not just falling over in a wood and not affecting anything, in order for that exemption to apply. We will be sharing these slides afterwards, so these links you can see in the slides you go. You'll be able to access things for further information. But 2 points I thought I would just add. Once we agree restocking conditions on a license, when those trees are felled, those restock conditions become binding, and we can't change them. And we're often asked, I don't know if if we want to plant conifers here now, can we change? So we can't formally change restock conditions, that they stay in place, but we might be able to agree alternative conditions in some cases. So we would send a discretionary enforcement agreement letter, which would basically say, well, okay, we'll agree to you doing these other conditions that we think are suitable, but if they don't work, or you don't keep to them, all we'll be enforcing is the original conditions when that license was granted. And another common kind of theme that I keep coming across is with ash dieback. Oh yeah, we felled these trees because we had ash dieback. So that's not an exemption on its own. Obviously, dead trees are exempt. Ash dieback, if it falls into the category of dangerous and nuisance trees and is providing an imminent risk, then obviously it could be exempt. But yeah, that was about all I wanted to say, just to remind people of some salient points with Forestry Act. If you've got other questions, regulations related, then please do pop them in the chat, and we can hopefully address those later. So, CS higher tier woodland improvement. Lochlan very kindly preempted, saying I might not know all the answers. I've been doing lots of research to try and get my head around the new grant, and there are some gaps still in the detail, but they are trickling out slowly. But the overarching message is that the grant is new and improved. So it's an expanded offer with new actions and capital items and improved rates. The great news for me is that there's a rolling application window. So hopefully that's good news for yourselves. Rather than rushing to get this application in by the deadline and then waiting until January, hopefully, to get your agreement, you can apply all year round, and there'll be monthly start dates rather than everything theoretically starting on the 1st of January. You can apply online via the Rural Payment Service, so they're currently developing an online application portal. And more good news, the payments will be made quarterly now, rather than one annual payment. So that should help with people's cash flow. The plan is that we open up in the summer, and we've begun to invite customers to begin what we call pre-application activities, which is something new this year. So at the moment, you can't apply for CS higher tier without undertaking that pre-application. So we're writing to people who've had management plans approved since 2023 and haven't yet had a higher tier agreement. And then we're going to people who've had management plans approved before that. In between people who've had agreements finishing last year as well before opening up fully. So basically, customers are being written to saying, do you want to apply? And they respond, say yes, I want to apply, or no, thank you, and we'll move on to somebody else. And the pre-application form they fill in, it details or indicates what sort of things they want to apply for and whether any amendments to the management plan might be required. So it could be, say, oh yeah, there's a ride management supplement. I'm going to create some rides, and we might say, well, that's okay, but you don't have felling permission currently to for open space felling. So we don't want that to put people through that right when they apply. This pre-application gets them thinking about what do I need to do so that when we open up for applications, I'm pretty much ready to go. So yeah, at the moment I've had a few. We've had discussions with people via email and phone, and in some cases a site visit just to check what they've got in mind is feasible. At the moment, the mixed applications are being dealt with separately. So I don't know if people know, mixed applications, we've got agri-environment schemes and woodland schemes. A landowner could have, agri-environment options and put them in together with the woodland options. So they're being dealt with separately, but once the online process is open, they could either remain split or be joined. It depends on the timings, basically. So it could be that the agri-environment option, people need to go away and do a feasibility study. So it's just giving applicants the option to say, actually, I'll carry on with my woodland application to get that ball rolling, or, no, I'll wait and I'll just have one agreement that covers both options. If you're planning to apply for species management, we'll elaborate on this later, you'll need an approved species management plan, and there's a capital item to fund those plans now. So again, we want to highlight this to people early on and give them a chance to go away, apply for a grant to write the plan, and get the plan approved before they apply for CS Higher Tier when it opens. And I think the long-term aspiration is that we merge this pre-application process into the woodland management approval process. If people indicate that, yes, I want a plan because I want to go into CS Higher Tier. So I found this table very useful just to get my head around things. So that the blue bar at the top is CWD2. That is the woodland improvement base action. So previously we just had WD2, which paid £100 a hectare, and applicants were expected to do 19 prescriptions potentially where they were appropriate for that £100 a hectare. Most of those 19 prescriptions have been pulled out, so they're not in this blue bar anymore. They're in these supplements lower down, so there's extra money basically. But you need this base action. I have got slides. I will talk about these in a bit more detail, but just to give you this overview, you need this base option to apply for the supplements. The dark green boxes are supplements that can be stacked on top of the base option. So we've got native woodland supplement, pause restoration and resilience. They can't be stacked on each other, but potentially all three could be stacked on top of the base option. If someone's got ASNW over here, pause somewhere else on their estate, and they want to apply the resilience supplement elsewhere, that would be fine. We expect that management plans will have the aspirations to support these supplements, So this is, again, part of the thing we're checking with the pre-application process. And then we've got these light green supplements, which can be stacked on top of those above again. Again, I'll go into a bit more detail. The brown boxes, species management plans, species recovery actions for things like pine martins, or public access actions. Again, all stackable on everything above, and don't need a management plan, because like species management plans, recovery plans have their own plans. And then at the bottom, we've got capital items still. So there are new capital items added and some rate increases. Some of those can be applied for standalone. Somebody says, well, I just want a fence around my wood, then fine. Some of them can only be applied for in conjunction with the base option. So for example, ride management, we would want that there's now a capital item, but again, I'll expand on that a bit later. So yeah, previously WD2 paid £100 a hectare. It's gone up to £127 a hectare, and the core actions are management and creation of deadwood, open space management, so that just could be rides or other open space, glades, and monitoring. There's a new addition assessment tool that's available as an app. I've had a play with it last year and it was reasonably easy to use. So the expectation is you do this condition assessment in year 1 and another assessment in year 9 to see, well, have things changed? Do I have more species, more regen, more deadwood? How are my veteran trees, etc. Previously, the minimum eligibility for size was 3 hectares, and that's come down to half a hectare. But there's a minimum payment of £500. So that just applies to the base option. The other supplements are paid pro rata. And the agreement length has increased from 5 to 10 years. So I should say most of these changes have come around, based on feedback from applicants. What can we do to improve the scheme? So first supplement, managing native woodland and ASNW. Again, it just pulled things down from the old WD2 option. Targeted to enhance native woodland for biodiversity benefits. So things like scrub control, cyclical scrub cutting, coppicing, thinning, felling, veteran trees, identifying those, mapping them, perhaps halo thinning around them. And there's a new option to support grazing. So again, provided your management plan has boxed off that aspiration, and we've approved it, that is a potential action. We've also got managing and restoring pores, so very similar. Again, scrub control, thinning, felling, etc. But more of an emphasis on reducing coniferous species to obviously restore the pores and get some light in. And this action also supports restocking with native broadleaves. So again, all this used to be in the £100 a hectare. You can see the money's going up, £127 a hectare plus 275 to make things a bit more viable, particularly for some of the smaller woodlands. And then we've got improving woodland resilience. So this was based on the old prescription, silvicultural transformation, and moving to CCF. This could be things like thinnings, so not a normal silvicultural thinning, to get you to your final crop volume for a clear fell, but thinning to move towards, a CCF regime, or selective felling, where you're anything that's helping to increase, the age classes, the structure, the species diversity. It could be early respacing on woodland edges to help make them more resilient to wind going forward, or re-wetting to counter drought, and just increasing that number of species in your woods for the resilience against pests and diseases. So this slide and the previous two slides, you could say they've got a very strong biodiversity focus to them. And I'm kind of just jumping sideways a bit here, because I often get this kind of feedback from people that it's either they want to do things for biodiversity, or they're focused on timber production. And we keep trying to say to people, look, we want multi-purpose woodlands that deliver multiple benefits. So I didn't take this picture, but I think it kind of is a good nod towards that ethos. So we've got a veteran tree in the middle, bits of snags and hollow, holes in it for woodpeckers and bats. We've got some dead wood on the floor. We've got a little nod to timber production with the stacks there. We've got different age classes. We've got conifers and broadleaves, and different species, different broadleaf species. In the background, it looks like there's a car park and some open space and a path, so that there's perhaps public access there. So we're trying to say to people, think broadly. Well-managed woods provide a range of benefits. So it could be that this particular woodland, other parts of it, might have things like other historic features within the woodland. So moving on to the other supplements that could be stacked on there. Managing historic features within woodland, what looks like a very high rate of £943 a hectare. That is just payable on the footprint of the feature. If it's just, say, like a charcoal kiln, there's normally something like a 6 metre buffer. If it's a scheduled ancient monument, there's a 20 metre buffer, but it's just applied on the footprint of the feature, not the buffer. The rate is so high because it's expected that you keep that feature and those buffers clear of vegetation. We've got managing woods for flood and drought mitigation. So you can see a leaky woody dam. So that, that was actually, I think, that's in Cumbria, was paid for with a capital item. And this new supplement, a mere £56 a hectare, is for the maintenance of that feature. So it's not just a case of put it in and walk away. We want people to go back, after heavy rainfall events, check it hasn't washed away, doesn't need any repairs, and monitor, the effects of these features in the woodland. We've also got supplements for ride management for 2 and 3 zone rides. So again, that all was used to be in the £100 a hectare. And I thought I'd put this diagram in because people often get confused with zone 1s, 2 and 3. So you can see zone 1 in the middle. I've got my little pointer there, a tiny little strip. If your intention is just to manage that grass strip, then we would expect that to be done under the base option, the open space management. But if you want zone 2 or 3, then it's £60 or £197 respectively. So yeah, zone 1, grassy strip. Zone 2, your herbaceous layer, which might be kind of swiped or mown once a year. And zone 3, your shrub layer, which could be coppice once every 10 years potentially in the life of the scheme, with occasional trees. So that the total width of the ride, you can see at the bottom there, times the length has moved this to a hectare per hectare payment to reflect the extra kind of work that's involved. So I appreciate that's a very diagrammatic and with a geometric kind of profile to it. But to give you some examples, we want some organic shapes in these rides. Yeah, you can see there's a bit of a curve here. This looks a bit like the herbaceous layer. It's not all nice and straight. And then you've got your shrub layer with occasional high trees and pinch points in the ride at the top, for aerial connectivity for red squirrels, dormice, depending on where you are and the size of the wood. And a similar example there, you can see the grass strip is much narrower here compared to the other picture. The herbaceous layer is a bit wider. And then your shrub layer with occasional high trees. So this bit's been thinned a good bit harder. And you can see in the background, in the back, is dark and dense again. So what we want is light on these rides for butterflies, birds, foraging habitat for birds, basically. Back in undercover if they feel they're going to be about to be eaten. So they've got that security. And if people are creating new rides, yes, nice straight rides are great for managing deer and might be appropriate, but think about meandering rides so that there's always, or not always, but there's sunlight on some part of the ride for longer periods of the day than if we just had one long straight ride. So some other woodland supplements. There's a public access supplement, £92 a hectare, with woodland welcome signage and boards. I think they're still available. And additional features now paid per 100 metres. So footpaths, £77 a 100 metre, bridleways, right through to more expensive paths for people with reduced mobility, £221 per 100 metres. There's a new wildfire supplement. There's two rates. One's for management and one's for maintenance. I haven't been able to find out much more detail on the difference between that yet. I don't know how widely used it'll be because it's only available on designated and protected sites. So triple SIs, for example. I'll talk more about deer and squirrel supplements in a moment, but all these supplements we've looked at so far last for 10 years in conjunction with the base option. The next two, invasive plant species control, so things like Himalayan balsam, payable for 5 years. There's 3 different rates from 140, I think it's 240 and 380. And rhododendron control, payable for 5 years. So, we would expect that after 5 years, you're not still ongoing, fighting these things. And I should say, rhododendron control was a capital item for dealing with the big, expensive, difficult stuff. And this is a supplement to help them maintain that and stop it spreading and dealing with any more seedlings that pop up. And we got a bracken control supplement as well. Species management. So the brown boxes all require species management plans. So PA7 is the capital item to write the species management plan. And again, just to reiterate what I said earlier, we need these in place before people apply. So start thinking now. If you want these things, you can go away and write the plan. You're not committing yourself at this point to anything other than writing the plan if you want to claim the money. Bracken control, I mentioned bracken control and rhododendron control supplements as well. So the plan is on a template. You download the correct template for the correct species. You know, if you need one for squirrels and one for deer, then it's £204.79 per plan. Yeah, on gov.uk for you to download. And you send the correct templates to the relevant species management mailbox, which again is listed on gov.uk. So, you know, for us, deer and squirrels will go into a Forestry Commission mailbox. You might have seen American mink, you know, I think that's going to a Natural England mailbox. And equally, we might be, you know, consulting Natural England over certain species plans. So I'm not going into all of them, just to look at the, you know, the deer and squirrel plans. We're the lead agency for this, and our deer officers approve the plans. And what's new for this year is that previously we've just paid this in woodland parcels. Potentially we can pay this on non-woodland parcels now, wood pasture, you know, adjacent arable fields, where deer are a problem. So provided that's all in the same, you know, SBI, the applicant can make a case to control deer outside of woodlands, and that will be at the discretion of the deer officer. So with the plan, we need a map at parcel level showing where controls will be carried out. We want an assessment of the deer impact. You know, what damage are they doing? You know, is it significant browsing, or what species have we got? And methods of control and monitoring. So, you know, is it collaborative culls? Are we stalking? Are we just shooting from high seats? We're going to monitoring. Are we going to be putting in deer exclosure plots so we can see the effectiveness of stalking? And the expected cull numbers and intended level of effort. So we need some assessment of, you know, how many deer have we got at the moment? How many do you think we can get out? And this is how many days we're going to put in to achieve that. Equally, with grey squirrels, it's a similar story. You know, that historically we've just paid for the control of these in woodlands. We can now pay for them on other habitats. If you look on gov.uk, it lists, you know, a whole range of habitats, like, you know, sand dunes and so on, which, you know, it's unlikely we'll pay that there. You know, the intention is to pay it in other wooded habitats. So if someone says, well, I've got a hedge, you know, can I put that in? You know, it's going to have to be a hedge with a excuse me. It's going to have to be a hedge with a significant number of trees that, you know, form a corridor for grey squirrels, rather than a, you know, hawthorn hedge that's still at chest height. So again, we need a map showing where that management is going to be carried out. The plan will again give an assessment of the grey squirrel impact and the damage that they're doing. Methods of control. You know, we want to see, well, are you just trapping? Are you rebaiting? Are you shooting at bait stations, or a combination of the, you know, the two methods? Monitoring with transect lines, and as with the deer, you know, an expected kind of figure of cull numbers and the intended level of effort. Okay, so how many days am I going to spend trapping in the, you know, the months from March through to middle of summer, when, you know, the food is at its lowest? You know, that's when we'll expect to see most of the effort going in, when there's the greatest chance of success. So capital items, they can be applied for alongside the CWD2 option or standalone. You can see there's a link in this slide, so that will take you to the relevant page. If you scroll down that page, it will tell you these capital items can be applied for standalone. These ones can only be applied for in conjunction with the CWD2 option. But yeah, 3 years to do the works, to carry out the works, and a further 3 months to submit claims. Yeah, some examples: deer fencing, exclosure plots could be used with your deer management supplement. Rhododendron control, mentioned earlier, that capital item could be followed up with the supplement to then manage the the regrowth and regen going forward. Leaky woody dams, stone wall restoration, top wiring, and then an example of some new capital items. We've got creating 2 or 3 zone rides. So that will pay up to 100% of the actual costs. And the FY7, I mentioned the assessing woodland condition, the app you can get for your phone. That pays a minimum of £300 a hectare for those visits to assess the condition. So, and the key one, we can't have woods without it. Well, we probably can, but it makes a big difference to getting woods managed, is infrastructure. So whether on the left, if you've got a CCF regime, you need to be getting into that wood regularly to make those interventions, or make life easier for your stalkers, removing carcasses and getting to different parts of the wood. Or on the right, this was a pause restoration job, quite a large pause site actually, and all it needed was a very small lay-by for them to stack timber and wagons to pull off the road and load. So we pay 60% of the actual costs. You do need 3 quotes. We might make an exception for 2 if people are struggling to get hold of quotes. One of those quotes can come from the applicant. If that quote is the one that we end up choosing, then we'll pay 80% of the 60%. Okay, so it's a little bit less for the applicant doing it themselves, but obviously in some cases people going out getting quotes, and then I can significantly undercut that. So it's to try and make it a bit more of a fairer playing field, so that people can get quotes back, because often quotes aren't coming back from civil engineers, and what's the point? I know you're going to do it yourself. I don't want to go to the time and trouble of putting a quote together. So that's a bit of a very quick run through. There's a link there to the Countryside Stewardship Hire Tier pages on gov.uk. It'll give you an overview to get you ready to apply. The YouTube video there, if you can spare an hour and a half or 3 half-hour slots with a cup of tea sometime, is worth watching. Just again to give you that broader overview. I've stolen most of my slides from this, so there'll be some repetition, but it lasts a bit longer, and there's a lot more questions from external customers at the end, which might be useful. Hopefully woodland agents can help you going forward, and then ourselves, woodland officers. I personally, I'm not like feeling brimming with confidence. I've got all the answers, but I know enough to guide people at this point in time and get them thinking. And I'm saying to people, look, we're here to help. I might just have to ask for a bit of patience while we get through to the final detail, and they're saying, oh, that's great, because I want your patience as well. But yes, we're here to help if we can. And that is my last slide. So I'll stop sharing and see if we have any questions, Lochlan.
Brilliant, thanks, Peter. I enjoyed that. It's really thorough and clear and concise as well. I've personally got a million questions, but it's not about me. There's we had a couple of pre-applied questions, but then a couple of questions in the chat. 2 questions in the chat so far. I will just say to everybody, please put your questions in the chat now, and we'll come to you. If you also want to put your hand up, that's an appropriate way to ask questions, and I'll call on you to unmute and turn your camera on and ask the question. Remember, there's me, Peter, Dougal, and Charles here to answer your questions, so you can direct it to someone specifically, or I'll just put it to the floor and somebody can answer it. So there is an interesting question here from Hugh Williams, who did leave. So, and it's also a question I know nobody's got the answer to, and it's not specific about grants. Basically, he says, grants are very much part of woodland policy and practice. That is good, but can create over-dependence on grants. Can we envisage a time when woodlands can be managed sustainably, economically, solely through woodland activities such as thinning, felling, etc., for the realisation of income and profit? I'm not going to ask you to answer that question unless we've got time at the end, because it's very subjective, and I think we could all talk for quite some time on it. And I'm looking at you, Dougal, particularly. You want to answer it, don't you? You can't.
I can't believe you've done that to me, but I'll wait.
But thank you, Hugh, for that. The second one, which is very relevant, and I had it as well, is from Thomas Cowley, who says, Peter, maybe one for you. What's the rate for welcome signage and orientation boards? Is there a capital item for that?
There is, and I was frantically looking on gov.uk, but I couldn't find it, along with some others. So, you know, I'm afraid it will come at some point, or maybe it's there and I just haven't managed to find it.
Is it an old one? Could be an old one.
It's not something I've ever had in previous grant schemes. So it came out 2023, I think, was the first year they had like the access payments, but I haven't come across them personally.
Thanks. So the next question I've got here is about the payments for rides, and it's whether can they be applied. There's a few parts to it. Can they be applied to woodland edges, as in a half ride, and can they be applied to areas which contain a forest road either side of the forest road, or the whole forest road if it's a grassy road?
So the second part, yes, you know, your forest road could be, you know, it could be a metalled service, or it could be a grassy ride. I think if it's just a forest road, you know, with no grass on it, then we probably wouldn't expect you to do anything under the basic supplement. But yes, you know, if the sides of the forest road still need managing, then, you know, that is extra work, isn't it, for the applicant? The first point regarding the rides and using half of it on a woodland edge, I'd like to say yes. It is only half the work. Though the rate's kind of been determined for, and I don't think we can, you know, the computer will say no, you know, how could we split this? I suppose we could just put in half the area, couldn't we? But I imagine the answer is no, and probably the correct answer would be, you know, well, we have got the resilience supplement, and you know, you could do some more coppicing, scrub cutting, thinning, early respacing to help make a wind firm edge that way.
Yeah. So is there any comments from the other panelists on that, maybe practically, or we move into the next question?
Just can I just jump back, Dougal, here? Just I'm looking at the signage. Sorry, I'm going backwards, but it looks like there was something as part of, you know, access payments that signage was included as, if you like, as part of access for people, Peter, WS4. I'm just wondering whether we can continue to post any links we might find over the next few days into the chat, but also get in touch with. We can get in touch with people directly. Earlier on, I think Paula posted a way to get hold of us, and we'll continue to research any unanswered questions, just to let people know that, Lochlan.
That's great, thanks. I've also found AC3, which is install and maintain signage, and that's £55.63 per sign. And that's not a specific higher tier option, it's a universal higher tier option, so it could be applied on signs as well.
Oh, well done. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it easy to find these grants?
Because I'm so used to looking for them that I can find them. It's not that easy. The next question. So there's a minimum payment for a higher tier of £500 per hectare per year, which is, if to say you've got half a hectare, instead of getting WD 2.5 times 127 quid a hectare, you get, for half a hectare, you get 500 quid a year. Does that mean if you've got half a hectare, that is a sort of disincentive to apply for the supplements, because you'll be doing more, but you'll still be at that £500 cap? Does that make sense?
I didn't quite follow that. I don't think a disincentive to apply for the supplements because they'll be paid for pro rata. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because if you've got 1 hectare, which is now eligible for WD2, that's going to be £127 per hectare per year. But because it's less than £500, you get the minimum per year of £500. Is that correct?
Yeah, your minimum base option, you'll be getting £500 a year. If you've got half a hectare and you apply for the resilience supplement, you'll just get half of that per hectare. It's, I guess, they've tried to make the new offer a bit more, I don't know if lucrative is the wrong word, but better for people, particularly for the smaller woodland owners. But where do you draw the line of different thresholds? So we've responded to feedback. Who knows, we might respond to more of it going forward if we find it's an issue, big issue.
So the minimum payment is just for the base option, and the additional options will be paid on the actual hectare. So a 1 hectare with the base option and the resilience grant would get £500 plus 202 for the 1 hectare. So you get £702.
Yeah.
Sounds quite good for a small woodland. There's a question here, which is there any revenue potential on smaller parcels of woodland, 1.1 hectares? I think that more or less covered it, I would say, if anyone's got anything to add there. And I guess maybe the grants, but including anything else that the panel's aware of for a small 1.1 hectare woodland.
I think we've covered it, but yeah, correct me if we've misunderstood the question.
Yeah. The UCO grant, this is the next question. This is switching to woodland creation grants now. The UCO grant is going to run until April this year. What is going to happen afterwards? Can I still apply for a UCO now?
Yes, you can. I did hear this just recently about what's happening after April, UCO closing, and I couldn't find anything on gov.uk to warrant that, but other colleagues said, oh yes, I've seen it, and when I've asked again, it seems to have been removed. I don't know if Paul has got a link. There you go, pop in the chat. But yeah, we did find something earlier using the grant finder, and you can see if you follow that link through, it will be open after April. It's currently on gov.uk. It says closing date 30th of September 2025. And we don't know, we can't say any more beyond that. So.
Okay. So as far as you're aware, not closing.
Yeah. No need to panic. Yeah.
So, question on the budget availability, which I'm sure you won't have full visibility on, but SFI was recently pulled because you reached the maximum allocation. Do we have any idea what the maximum allocation is for higher tier? And is any of that ring fence for forestry, or is it in the general? Is it tied to, if agricultural grants are taken up much quicker, will there be no money left for woodland grants? And do you have any idea of the total budget?
I'm afraid not, no. all I know is that, we are opening for business. You could say we are opening kind of piecemeal at the moment with the pre-application phase, but I don't think that is budget related, or let's just see how many apply. The intention is to open up fully. So yeah.
And can I come in there, Lochlan? There was a Defra forum, Forestry Woodland forum earlier this week, and I wasn't able to attend, but I got some feedback. So I'm going to read this out in the context of a WhatsApp message from somebody who was there. So if anyone listening to this or the recording takes it in that way, but it does partially maybe give something around that answer. Things are going to look pretty much as they are for 25-26 under the Nature for Climate Fund, with the exception of dropping the ARB and Forestry Training Fund, brackets, this is a shame as it's been popular. They're also looking to drop the Woodland Creation Acceleration Fund. That's a specific, I forget what that is now, Peter, but that's a strategic thing, which I'm not sure might be that relevant to listeners today. And they're going to do less promotions and comms to save money. It's not a protected department, so there could be some more cuts post 26. But if at a Defra open forum with the likes of myself there and reporting to others on WhatsApp, yeah, there looks like they've isolated a couple of I would argue peripheral, but the others might not. But because training obviously really, really important. But I know a lot of people went through that training. It was exceptionally popular. So if you like, hopefully there's a sort of base layer of skills that have been raised through that through the NCF over the last 5 years. The Woodland Creation Acceleration Fund, I can't remember what that is, but that looks like that's threatened as well. So not core stuff. So that feels like kind of business as usual, but then we've obviously in this hiatus periods before things are finalised.
Yeah, and then the second barrier to woodlands getting into the grant scheme is Forestry Commission capacity, and I suppose the rolling window is going to be helpful. Peter, do you get a feel for the area team in terms of what the workload is looking like?
Yeah, I mean, looking back over the last 20 years, my patch has reduced twice. We've took on an extra woodland officer in our area. We've took on an extra woodland creation officer and support officers to help us. We've got development woodland officers. We've got tier officers. From my perspective, I have very busy periods. I'm nowhere near as busy as I used to be, and I feel, we've got a hell of a big team that's, we are quite resilient. If I get a load of work that comes in before I go on holiday, it's great now. I can say, oh, can you do this? So my perspective looking forward, I'm not feeling any kind of threat there. I'm thinking we're a better place now than we ever have been to, respond to these grants.
Good news, yeah. A question in the chat from Thomas again. Thanks, Thomas. Asking, can I confirm there will be no more funded training? And I guess that's what your intel suggests, Douglas.
Yeah, I'm just going to type in. I'm going to type in a response to that into the chat. Lochlan.
Thanks. That is unfortunate. It's the first I'm hearing of that as well. Next question. How do you apply for plant health grants? For example, ash dieback clearance grant. Is it considered a capital grant and standalone, or is it part of CS or SFI?
Right. So this is going to be a long-winded answer, but please bear with me. So we don't have a grant for ash dieback clearance as such. We've got two grants to help with tree health. We've got the CS Woodland Tree Health Grant, and we've got the Tree Health Pilot Grant. Now, neither of those grants pay for felling of ash. The CS Woodland Tree Health Grant is open all year round and open to anyone if they've got ash they've had to fell because it was infected with cholera, that grant will help pay for restocking to increase species diversity. So that's the CS Tree Health Grant. Anyone can apply for that. If I just share my presentation again, bear with me. Come on, catch up. We've got the Tree Health Pilot grant. Now this, because it was a pilot, was started off in Cumbria and I think in the southeast, and then as the grants developed, they've extended some of the areas. So if you're in this area, whoever's asked the question, that's your first hurdle to eligibility for this grant. I'll stop sharing because I want to just look at some other slides, but that's the first level of eligibility. If the ash trees in question are roadside ash or affecting public rights of way, then you're eligible for other grants to assist with the hassle factor, if you like, of dealing with that. So it's not, here's a grant to cut down your ash trees, but it will pay for things like road closures, tree survey reports to understand the condition of the trees, European protected species surveys, if you've got bats in the trees, a facilitator's time to manage. You can do group applications, and that will also help with the cost of restocking. It pays at the same rates as the CS Tree Health Grant, but where this grant trumps the other one is that it also pays a maintenance grant of £400 a hectare for 3 years to make sure the trees establish. Now, there's another hurdle with this. Just because you're in that area and you might have ash on the roadside doesn't mean you're in. You have to submit an expression of interest, and Defra will look at that and think, well, do we want to test some more cases, or have we had loads of grants already for dealing with ash on roadsides? This one a little bit different. So yeah, it's not you're in that area, you're in. CS Tree Health, yes, provided the trees have died with ash dieback, you can apply and we'll help you. But Tree Health Pilot is a bit more, there's a few more hurdles to eligibility, should we say. So sorry, that was a long-winded, convoluted answer, but there's 2 potential routes to help.
That's a good answer, thanks. So another question from Thomas, a really good question. I think probably represents the position that a lot of people find themselves in. He said the higher tier. He said the higher tier is going live this summer. When is summer, and how does going live relate to the pipeline of organisations with management plans entering the scheme? He says, I have recently have an approved woodland management plan, and I've heard nothing so far. Is the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, he has a second area of woodland with a felling licence. What's the route to getting a management plan in place for that, and what are the timescales for getting that subsequently into CS? So he's got one with a ready management plan, and he hasn't heard anything, wants to know when he can apply, and a second bit of woodland with no management plan, wants to understand how and what the timelines are to getting that through the whole process.
Yeah. So yeah, I wish I knew, Thomas, when summer, when the date was, when the date is going to be, I should say. We thought we were going to open last year. We're telling people, oh, in the winter, in the spring, and now it's the summer. The only difference I can say between those is, we are seeing things happen. We are writing out to people and getting them to apply. in terms of the pipeline, who are we inviting to do the pre-app? The prioritization is customers who've had an approved management plan from 2023 onwards and haven't had the opportunity to apply for higher tier previously. So we've got a list of who that is, and the letters are being sent out to cohorts of perhaps 1 or 2 in each woodland officer's patch, to write to them, say, are you interested in applying? If we don't hear back from you in 10 days, we'll assume that's a no. Come back to us in 10 days and say yes, and then you can fill in your form and get us going. So I think part of the reason for that approach is because we were closed all last year. We didn't want to just say, right, we're open, and all of a sudden we're swamped. So I've got them trickling in, and I'm thinking, last year, I need to find out the detail of that. So it's it is giving us a bit of breathing space. So that's one priority. The next priority is customers who in 2024 had expiring higher tier agreements. And then it goes to everyone else who's got a valid woodland management plan prior to 2023. And then, we will open up at some point, the floodgates will open, and so I don't know where you are, Thomas, in terms of that priority that we've just I've just read out. It could be people in this first priority who've had an approved plan from 2023. We're still working through the cohorts of people in that. So depending on when your plan was approved. Sorry, I can't give you a clear answer, but if I just look at the chat, your question again. So you've got a recently approved management plan and heard nothing so far. So I would hope that if it's recently approved from 2023 onwards, you should be hearing from us soon. It might be worth just sorry, people. Plus, it might be worth having a word with your woodland officer. I know some of the people who have been written to, they've been badgering me saying, when am I going to, get something? So I knew they were out there and keen, so it's just handy to know. They might just check you are on the list and be able to manage your expectations a bit better. And your second point, you've got a second area of woodland for which you have a felling license. What's the route to getting a management plan in place for that, and what will the timelines look like for getting that onto CS higher tier? So the route, and perhaps I should have put this in the presentation, but the route is to apply for the PA3 capital item, which you can do at any time. When you get your agreement through, then you can start work on writing your plan. The timelines look like for getting that onto CSI tier. The timelines for approving a plan are variable depending on, if it's just thinning or whether it needs to go on the public register, whether it's got a few simple compartments or massive big areas that need, lots of digitizing. But in terms of timelines for getting that onto the CS higher tier, I imagine that will be further down the list, Thomas. It's the third bullet point was everyone who has a valid management plan prior to 2023. So, whether I'm being naive, hopefully by the time you apply for a plan and get it written and approved, we'll have worked through that list, and it shouldn't be too long. But so sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer.
Thanks, Peter. Charles has got his hand up. Do you want to come in, Charles?
Yeah, great, thanks. I'm just going to sort of raise what Peter said to the previous question of we've had chats with lobbying is a hard term. We've had chats with some woodland officers and successfully sort of brought forward timelines on a couple of estates where we've sort of proven a high priority. So they're triple SI, they're large scale, they've been had a management plan sort of waiting for a couple of years, for example, and then have been invited on a sort of slightly earlier tranche. So I think probably just some reprioritization can happen, is my experience. So it's worth asking a question, I would say, without bombarding Peter too much.
Yeah, I would support that. I mean, when I saw the list of people, you know, replied be somebody up near the top, and that person said to me, "No, I don't want the grants." You know, so well, don't be wasting time writing to them. They go further down. This person lower down is itching to go, so move them up the list.
Another question, which is we've actually already answered, so I'll just cover that quickly, which is what's the extent of the CSIT funding, and will it dry up like SFI did? And the answer to that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we don't know, but it doesn't seem like it will, or at least as quickly as. It doesn't seem like nobody's hearing any imminent danger, but nobody has a clear message on that.
Yeah, that's correct.
I would have thought that Defra forum this week, given that it did mention a few things, would have set alarm bells, would have been an appropriate place to have said manage expectations, and it didn't manage expectations. So, you know, nothing at the moment would surprise anybody, would it? But I think that was really recent, and they did say some things were potentially ending. So yeah, I would think that we should think glass half full on that one, Lochlan.
I'd like to, yeah. Yes. Another question about ED1, which is the capital item for educational visits. Is that eligible for Woodlands, and how many times can I do it in an agreement?
Yes, it is. Yeah, you've really got me on the back foot with that one. I think I remember reading there is a one-off payment for no, what's that for? I think that's to help get people registered or accredited somehow to, you know, run these visits. And then I think there is so much per visit after that. In an ideal world, while I've been talking and umming and ahhing, Lochlan would be typing into the grant finder and tell me again, "Oh, it's here, Peter. It's
I'm on it, but I can't."
I'm on it, but it's
I mean, it's £363 per visit, and the visit must last at least 2 hours, and the people on the visit must be under the age of 18. So I think it's a great way to introduce people to Woodlands and generate income. But for somebody of this person, I suppose, would like to do a lot of it, or maybe as a partnership with the school. I'm not sure if there is. Oh wait, here we go. You cannot claim for more than 25 visiting groups in any agreement year. So you can potentially have 25 ED1s per year in your agreement, that would suggest.
That update is January 24, isn't it? So there's I mean, there's potential for change with these things because they're the age of them.
Oh, sorry, I'm on ED1. There is the ED1, which is, it seems the same. It's a 3-year thing, and you can have 25 funded farm visits per year. Funny how they put C in front of most options, but they put V in front of
What was that, Lochlan? VED1?
VED1. I'll put the link in the chat. It might not work because it's actually a link to a position on a page, if that makes sense, rather than its own page.
Yeah.
It should work. Yeah. Hopefully that helps.
That worked. Yeah, that worked.
So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. And another question here, and I think we'll maybe wrap up after this if no one has any other questions in the chat. But you still do have time to put your hands up. I've got a question in the chat. which is, can you apply the drought mitigation? Over what area can you apply the drought mitigation grant, the £53 per hectare? Is it a net area thing like the archaeological thing, or is it a gross area thing?
Yeah, I think is it £56 a hectare. My understanding is it's over the area that will be affected by that intervention. So it's kind of been, implied to me that it could be over the whole woodland parcel. If you're creating bunds or something to try and keep water in woodland, or blocking up drains, what area with the lie of the land are you expecting that to have an impact? So it's not just the area of the drain you've blocked up, for example. It's the area of the woodland that is affected or benefited from that action.
Yeah, thanks very much. Hopefully that is the case. Sounds good. And well, hang on, finally, so I think first of all, thank you to everyone that's been involved here, Grown in Britain, and all the panelists. Thanks everyone for coming. This recording will be on YouTube, on the Cumbria Woodlands YouTube pages in a couple of weeks, I think. And I think Paula has shared the recording in the chat from the last webinar a couple of weeks ago. If you want to stay up to date, I would recommend signing up to the Cumbria Woodlands newsletter. I'm not just saying that because I work for Cumbria Woodlands. I used to sign up to it a while ago. It's a really good newsletter. Go to the homepage of the Cumbria Woodlands website, scroll down to the bottom and put your email address in. But finally, before we go, Dougal, Hugh's first question, grants are very much part of woodland policy and practice. That's good, but can create over-dependence. Can we envisage a time when woodlands can be managed sustainably solely through woodland activities?
Thank you. So this will make everyone log off for sure. So it'll be down to the four of us sooner. But the key here is that our woodlands aren't managed as well as we would like. 40-odd% undermanaged. We're importing stuff from around the world. So to me, that indicates public money for public good is required to incentivize commercial management of woodlands, where those activities need to be, the balance need to be redressed, where you need intervention from public money for public good. I mean, squirrel control would be a classic one for me, where squirrels absolutely destroy carbon, timber, nature, loads of public good. It's really expensive to do. Why would you do it if there wasn't support and help, unless you were vested, and with 40% of our woods undermanaged? So there are some classic cases where it's definitely needed. I think probably Hugh's right. I know Hugh really well. He's, I agree with a lot of things that his sentiment there behind it. That is an ideal situation to be in, where timber prices do that. We publish hardwood prices, and we're about to publish the 2024 hardwood prices. But sometimes that's not enough for small woodland owners in particular to be able to intervene into their woodlands, into small patches and small pockets, hard to reach, where the timber doesn't pay for operations. So there are some horses for courses where perhaps, at large scale, they're commercially viable on their own and don't need intervention. That's really hard for government to pick and choose and means test how it applies grants, isn't it, Peter? It's really hard, to sort of say, well, they don't need it, but these guys do. So I think it's with us. I think we're in a world now where there'll be a lot more scrutiny over what things are bought and paid for by the public purse. My personal view is that any intervention by the public sector should be a catalyst for the non-public sector to take on and get the balance of payments sort of on a commercial basis. So I think intervention should be focused at enabling the sector to look after itself, rather than just constantly supporting it endlessly. That's fair. So, and I think Hugh would agree with that.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. Would anyone, Charles or Pete, like to add anything there? Charles, I thought you might.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I'm a great believer that grants can be a huge enabler, as Dougal said, but I'm also an even greater believer that you shouldn't apply for a grant to make you do something that's not your core objective or what is really the best for what you want that woodland to become. So use it to help you along that journey to do some extra things. And probably Peter's point and the public purse point is it should be paying for extras, not core work where we can as well. So obviously where it can supplement, where it can add to what you'd like to do, but don't forget those core values, objectives, vision for what you want that woodland to become and look like. And if a grant can enable that along the way while it's here, brilliant. You know, they're there, use them. But yeah, don't try not to let them change course for you.
I think I would add in, in my patch in West Cumbria, I've got some good small scale contractors who, drag me out. Oh, I need a felling license for this wood. I'm going to manage for firewood. Oh, we've got grants for this, grants for that. It's all right. They can make it pay without the grants. They don't want the paperwork. So it's great to see.
Good to hear.
Good. Well, thanks again, everyone. And I'll call it there. So thanks.
Cheers, Lochlan.